Early on New Year's Day 2023, law enforcement in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, scanned the vehicle's registration number and found that the owner's license was suspended. They initiated a traffic stop, leading to a viral confrontation with 33-year-old Nicole Golomski, who was behind the wheel. The woman immediately adopted a hostile and indignant tone with the policeman who approached her window, calling him a dirty, lazy cop, before adding, "Yeah, I smoke a lot of weed." As shown in body cam footage, Golomski puffed on a cigarette throughout the interaction with the officer while her boyfriend, Irvin Zaragoza, sat in the passenger seat without a seatbelt on. The woman questioned why the officer had pulled her over, asking, "You really don't have anything better to do on New Year's Eve? New Year's night?" Though it was around 5:30 in the morning at the time, Golomski went on to accuse the officer of entrapment and harassment, and also made an obscene gesture that seemed to mimic an intimate act. At one point during the uncomfortable exchange, the woman told police, "I have daddy issues and I don't like men. I don't trust them. I have PTSD." Wisconsin court records indicated that Golomski had a total of 60 criminal charges to her name. Number 5. Priia Sahi. In October of 2022, TikTok influencer Priia Sahi, who became popular under the online alias Queen Bee, parked her car outside an Asda supermarket in Swindon in southwest England. The 29-year-old proceeded to get drunk behind the wheel of her Audi. The police were called, drawing PC Marcin Kozak, Wiltshire Police's first Polish community support officer, to the scene. An intoxicated Sahi recorded her ensuing interaction with Kozak, live streaming it to her 100,000 social media followers. The woman told the officer that she couldn't understand him because of his accent, saying, "Learn English, you European whatever you are." She continued to hurl racial abuse at Kozak, who removed her from the vehicle and placed her in handcuffs for drinking behind the wheel. Sahi strongly protested her detainment, crying, "I've got no keys in my ignition, no keys in my ignition. I'm allowed to park up and drink. I'm not driving, so what are you arresting me for?" She was ultimately arrested for a public order offense. The following year, the social media star pleaded guilty to a racially aggravated charge while appearing in Swindon Magistrates Court. Sahi offered an apology to PC Kozak, stating that she was embarrassed by her actions. Her defense team claimed that the incident occurred when Sahi was experiencing a traumatic time and was in a frustrated state. She was ultimately imposed a fine in order to cover court costs. Number 4. Petro Addis. On June the 7th of 2021, English teen Petro Addis launched a vicious attack on his grandmother, a highly successful restaurateur and philanthropist who is described as the heart and soul of Brighton. Leading up to the incident, Addis's family had raised concerns about his struggles with mental health and drug abuse, as well as his increasingly entitled frame of mind. They eventually moved the 17-year-old in with his grandmother, 69-year-old Sue Addis, believing it would be a better environment for him. Pietro's mental state only worsened, however, and on the day of the attack, he experienced what was described as a transient paranoid psychosis. His delusional state reportedly caused him to believe that his grandmother meant him serious harm. The teen used 3 different kitchen knives to stab her upwards of 17 times. One of the stabs sliced through the full thickness of one of the victim's ribs. It was determined that Petro had been using cannabis, cocaine, ketamine, Xanax, and his grandmother's cancer medication in the months leading up to his violent outburst, which Sue unfortunately didn't survive. Petro was also known to abuse his amphetamine-based ADHD medication. He'd allegedly been selling his clothes and many of his personal possessions to bankroll his habit. The young man continued his drug use even after being taken into police custody for his grandmother's killing. He tested positive for cocaine and was in possession of a white powder which he tried to claim was flour, while on remand in a secure hospital. In a surprising turn of events, the doctors who'd interviewed the young man found no evidence of ADHD, psychosis, delusions, or obsessions. They contended that the deadly attack had in fact been meticulously planned and wasn't the result of a psychotic episode. In May of 2023, Pietro was sentenced to 15 years behind bars for the crime with a minimum custodial term of 10 years. Number 3. Layla Ilalai and Feda Merhi. At about 7 p.m. on May the 11th of 2019, New South Wales police pulled over a white Kia along Bondi Road in the Sydney suburb of Bondi. A search of the vehicle turned up more than $22,000 in cash, which had been placed in envelopes and concealed in the front glove box and boot. Officers also came upon substances believed to be cocaine and cannabis in a hidden compartment, along with cell phones and documents. The Kia's female occupants, identified as Feda Merhi and Layla Ilalai, were arrested on charges of supplying drugs. They were subsequently granted conditional bail to appear at Waverley Local Court the following month. According to subsequent reports, the raid was part of a targeted investigation into the supply and distribution of cocaine and other drugs across Sydney. On the night of the traffic stop, Ilalai complained about getting arrested and exhibited entitled behavior while speaking with officers. As shown in body cam footage, as she was being led away in handcuffs, the 26-year-old uttered, "I really don't appreciate this." One of the officers quickly retorted, "Well, you shouldn't be involved in drug supply then, should you?" While the case progressed through the legal system, Merhi and Ilalai were authorized to go on holiday in Bali after providing a surety of $5,000. Today's topic was requested by Beautifully Awakened 83, Candice Bedito 5495 and John Harling 5246. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Bianca Gomez. A city councilwoman from Victorville, California, was arrested for allegedly trespassing at Hesperia City Hall on the morning of August 2nd of 2018. According to booking records, 39-year-old Bianca Gomez was escorted out of the building in handcuffs shortly before 10 a.m., after which she was cited and released. Gomez posted a Facebook Live video which showed her typing on a laptop in a section of Hesperia City Hall. Suddenly, Hesperia City Manager Niles Benston, along with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputy, entered the room. As it would later emerge, Gomez had been helping potential Hesperia Council candidates Gonzalo Gurora and Robert Lucero file paperwork for the November election. However, she was working in an area of the building that wasn't open to the public. Numerous times, city employees asked the councilwoman to leave the restricted section, but she refused. Eventually, city staff contacted the sheriff's department. Gomez refused to answer the deputy's questions and repeatedly asked if she was being arrested. The woman resisted as she was being placed in handcuffs. However, no injuries were reported. She was booked at the High Desert Detention Center, though public records indicated that she was never charged with a crime. One of the potential candidates, who Gomez was helping on the day in question, later stated that the councilwoman kept talking over city staff and law enforcement. At the time of the incident, there was already an active recall effort against Gomez, who'd gotten into hot water for posting a live video of a former mayor's open casket viewing in June. The woman got into trouble with the law again during the summer of 2021. A man named Daniel Robert Rodriguez, who was wearing a ski mask, disrupted a Victorville City Council meeting. The man reportedly sat near the front of the council chambers and appeared to start filming Mayor Deborah Jones's husband, triggering an argument. Rodriguez was eventually taken away by deputies, but Gomez allegedly interfered with their efforts to remove the man and was arrested yet again. However, as of November of 2023, Gomez was still listed as a council member on the Victorville government website. We have more similar cases coming up for you after number 1, after which we'll be showing our release on when spoiled brats go wrong. Stick around if you'd like. Number 1. Frank Abbott Sweeney. In December of 2015, Idaho man Frank Abbott Sweeney was scolded by a woman for parking in a handicap spot without a placard on his pickup at the Garden City Post Office. Sweeney felt so embarrassed and disrespected by the woman, whom he didn't know, that he proceeded to launch a years-long campaign of harassment on her family as revenge. While describing the unnerving situation after the fact, investigator Darren Solman stated he felt entitled to do what he did. I think deep down in his mind, he feels like he can justify in his mind why he did it. Enraged by his encounter in the post office parking lot, Sweeney hired a private investigator to obtain information about the victim's family members, as well as private information like her home address. The man then used a manual typewriter and prepaid postcards to send venomous messages to the woman who'd confronted him. He also sent abusive letters to the victim's husband and 2 adult daughters. Some postcards were even sent to her workplaces and neighbors. In the messages, Sweeney falsely accused the family of being drunks, racists, and vile criminals. The onslaught of postcards continued even after the death of the victim's husband and subsequent change of address. Sweeney accurately referenced the woman's birth date, addresses, social security number, and constantly threatened that he was monitoring her house. The unhinged man managed to remain undetected for multiple years, using evasive tactics that were attuned to what the police would be looking for. Law enforcement finally got a break in the case after Sweeney got into yet another quarrel with a stranger, this time at the Wells Fargo Bank drive-through window in Garden City. He began sending similarly threatening messages to one of the victims at the bank. Police identified Sweeney through the drive-up window surveillance footage, and he was swiftly named a suspect in both stalking cases. During a search of the man's South Boise residence, investigators found the typewriter used to create the postcards, along with portraits of Hitler, other Nazi memorabilia, and 2 live rattlesnakes. Sweeney was surprised to have been arrested, asking police, "How did you catch me?" He was open and honest when speaking about his crimes and even seemed to enjoy talking about it. According to Solman, the 76-year-old stalker had an extensive criminal history, including wounding a police officer with a machine gun in the 1960s, as well as convictions for mail fraud, obscenity, weapons charges, and more. He also worked as a mercenary in Rhodesia and was accused of helping a Soviet spy to flee South Africa. Sweeney pleaded guilty to 6 felony counts of stalking and was sentenced to 51 months in prison. Number 8. Anna Costaki.
Well, I want to...
Just give me a second.
Okay. No, I want to talk to you. Okay?
I know I will. Just give me a second.
Well, why do you need the door closed? Have you been drinking alcohol? No?
I need my eyes closed, please.
Why do you need your eyes closed?
Because I can't hear them anything else.
You can't what?
Hear them anything else.
You can't hear them?
Yeah.
You can't hear your eyes.
I can't hear my ID.
You don't need to hear your ID.
I don't need to hear my ID. I just need to know that it's there.
Law enforcement in Weston, Wisconsin, responded to reports of a woman passed out in her car near a local convenience store. On April the 25th of 2022, customers had reportedly alerted the authorities out of concern that the woman, who was subsequently identified as 18-year-old Anna Costaki, had gotten into an accident. During their first interactions with her, officers noticed that she smelled of intoxicants and slurred her speech. Body cam footage of what followed was uploaded to the YouTube channel Code Blue Cam, where it was viewed over 5 million times. Costaki refused to present her ID to officers or get out of her car. The teen rambled while looking through her purse, at one point saying that she needed to close her eyes because she otherwise couldn't hear her ID. Law enforcement offered to help her and give her a ride home, but as the conversation progressed, the teen started wailing incoherently. She cursed and insulted the officer interviewing her, repeatedly ordering him to go look for her sister. She then tried to close her car door on him several times before striking him in the genital region. Costaki remained combative as she was pulled out of her car and handcuffed. She kept screaming and kicking at officers, who eventually placed her in the back of their patrol car. Once the doors were closed, Costaki started banging her head on the divider and kicking the seat. She was charged with battery on a police officer, resisting arrest, and was also given a citation for underage drinking. Number 7. Rebecca Cowan. On September the 18th of 2022, police in Cheshire, England, were called to a home in witness by the neighbors of Rebecca Cowan. The 28-year-old, who was severely intoxicated at the time, was found by 2 officers at around 4 a.m. outside her home. She was locked out with her 3 young daughters and shouting, "Get out of my house!" at the empty property as the children sobbed in the street. None of them were appropriately dressed for the cold morning weather, and the officers became concerned for their well-being. They offered to help and eventually located Cowan's key. One of them asked to enter the woman's house to ensure that they were all right. Cowan refused and started making threats while shouting at the police to get off her property. As the officers helped her inside, she kicked one of them and tried to bite the other in the arm and wrist in front of her children. Both officers emerged without injuries from the incident, which ended with Cowan's arrest. Once in custody, she admitted to the police that she became violent when drinking. She had previously been given a 9-month jail sentence at Liverpool Crown Court, suspended for 12 months, for assault occasioning actual bodily harm. Cowan was only 3 days from the end of her suspended sentence when she attacked the officers. She admitted assault and, given her history of violence, was ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation. Number 6. Hermes Calles Gasperin. On October the 8th of 2018, Florida man Hermes Calles Gasperin attacked his mother for bumping into him while she was making him dinner. Tension in their Bradenton home had arisen after 22-year-old Calles Gasperin had demanded his mother cook him dinner, and she'd asked him to wait a few minutes because she was busy. As the woman was preparing some sausages for Calles Gasperin, she accidentally knocked into him. He became enraged and started pelting her with the remaining sausages, one of which struck her in the right eye. Calles Gasperin then pushed her and put his hands around her neck. Upon being questioned by the police, the young man maintained he'd done nothing wrong, adding that he wouldn't have gotten mad if his mother had apologized for bumping into him. He was booked into the county jail for misdemeanor domestic battery in order to stay at least 500 feet away from his mother upon release. Number 5. Rachel Cannon. In March of 2014, teenager Rachel Cannon sued her parents for financial support, claiming that they'd abused her and kicked her out of their home. The honor roll cheerleader from Lincoln Park, New Jersey, made several grave accusations during the trial. 18-year-old Cannon claimed that she developed anorexia and bulimia in her sophomore year after her mother, Elizabeth, had called her porky and fat. She alleged that her parents' behavior had caused her weight to drop to nearly 90 pounds. Cannon also accused her father, Sean, a former police chief, of getting drunk and showing her inappropriate affection. The teen stated that she was entitled to $654 per week from her parents' combined yearly income of over $500,000, as well as the payment of tuition. Her parents, who at one point burst into tears in court, vehemently denied the allegations and presented an entirely different version of events. Sean and Elizabeth had become concerned for their daughter due to her increased drinking, partying, and late nights out. She had showed up drunk to a homecoming dance, had lost her position as the captain of the cheerleading squad at Morris Catholic High School, and had been suspended twice for cutting class. Elizabeth revealed in court that her daughter had stolen money from her and even tried to sabotage her marriage by creating a dating profile for her father. The parents determined that her boyfriend's influence was the source of her bad behavior and forbade her to see him, in addition to taking away her car and cell phone privileges. Cannon refused to follow their rules, ran away, and moved in with a friend. Her parents consequently stopped paying her school tuition. She sued them, alleging she was unable to support herself in spite of being 18 and eligible for employment. The judge presiding over the case, Peter Bogard, was presented with a voice message that Cannon had left her mother, in which the teen said that she hated her and wanted to defecate all over her face. The judge claimed he'd never seen such gross disrespect for a parent. Bogard encouraged the family to mend their differences, but also warned the legal representatives from both parties of a potential slippery slope in which parents could no longer lay down rules for their children for fear of litigation. In that regard, he posited what would follow, stating, "We opened the gates for a 12-year-old to sue for an Xbox, a 13-year-old to sue for an iPhone. What about a 15-year-old asking for a 60-inch TV?" All of Cannon's immediate financial claims were denied. Child Welfare Services investigated the matter and conducted interviews with all the parties involved, including Cannon's 2 younger sisters, but found no evidence to support the abuse allegations. The teen voluntarily dropped the lawsuit and reunited with her parents, who'd maintained throughout the lawsuit that they wanted her back home. Cannon's actions made headlines, resulted in ridicule and criticisms of entitlement, at a national level and beyond. Number 4. Max and Caroline Summer Rose Kennedy. 2 members of the Kennedy dynasty were arrested in August of 2017 at a rental home near the family's famed Hyannisport compound in Massachusetts. Law enforcement were called to the address at around 1 a.m. following a noise complaint from neighbors about a raging party that had involved loud music and fireworks. Officers from the Barnstable Police Department were met by 23-year-old Caroline Summer Rose Kennedy, granddaughter of assassinated former New York Senator Robert F. Kennedy. According to an arrest report, she cursed at the police and stuck her tongue out at them. While slurring her words, Caroline told an officer, "I went to Brown and I'm a teacher, sweetheart." She refused to take a breathalyzer, stating that she knew she was drunk. Caroline's father and Robert Kennedy's 9th son, Max, had responded when asked who was in charge of the party and proceeded to display similarly brattish behavior. The inebriated 52-year-old screamed at the police, jabbed his finger into an officer's chest and smashed a wall cabinet containing glass valuables. After Max had been handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser, Caroline threw herself against the vehicle and flung its doors open. Both Kennedys were taken into custody for disorderly conduct. The charge against Max was dismissed in lieu of a $150 fine, while Caroline's was to be dropped as well after she agreed to follow a counseling program that included community service. Number 3. Khloe Shannon June Power Leo. In 2019, Australian teenager Khloe Shannon June Power Leo faced a mandatory sentence of 6 months in jail following what was deemed an absolutely disgusting attack on a police officer. 18-year-old Power Leo had been approached by law enforcement in Mandurah in June of 2018. She was severely intoxicated and failed to provide any details when asked by officers. She was arrested but subsequently refused to leave the police vehicle, becoming very violent. As Officer Courtney Hay was struggling with her, Power Leo leaned forward and sank her teeth into her neck. The deep bite instantly drew blood. In November, the teen pleaded guilty to a slew of charges for which she was ultimately sentenced to 12 months in prison, at least half of which she'd have to serve before being eligible for parole. Number 2. Da Brat. Shantae Harris Dupart, known by her stage name as Da Brat, became the first platinum-certified female rap solo act through her debut album, Funkdafied. Launched in the mid-1990s, Harris Dupart added to her success in the years that followed, but was also responsible for several violent incidents, one of which resulted in her being imprisoned. On March the 8th of 2000, she argued with a woman named Rezu Robertu over VIP seating at the Chili Peppers nightclub in Buckhead, Atlanta. Harris Dupart pistol-whipped Robertu, inflicting a head wound that required multiple stitches to mend. She pleaded guilty to reckless conduct and was sentenced to 12 months of probation and 80 hours of community service, in addition to paying a $1,000 fine. On October the 31st of 2007, Harris Dupart was attending a Halloween party at the Studio 72 nightclub near Atlanta. She got into an argument with ex-NFL cheerleader Shayla Stevens, who was a hostess at the club. The latter turned away and went to get her manager. Moments later, Harris Dupart charged her from behind and struck her in the face with a rum bottle. Stevens was taken to a local hospital with face and head injuries, while her attacker was arrested. Da Brat, at the time in her mid-30s, pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, 7 years of probation, and 200 hours of community service. In 2014, Stevens was awarded $6.4 million by a civil trial jury to cover her injuries and loss of earnings. Number 1. Tommy Gilbert Jr.
911, where's the emergency?
It's at 20 Beekman Place.
20 Beekman Place.
20 Beekman Place, zip code 10022.
What are your cross streets?
50th and 51st.
Are you in an apartment or private house?
8D as in David.
David, on what floor?
8th.
What's the emergency today, ma'am?
My husband is, I think, dead.
Okay.
Please
I'm
rush.
connect you to EMS. Do not hang up, okay?
Hello?
Okay, look, Florida, is the ambulance for you or for somebody else?
It's for my husband.
You awake?
He's a dead, I think.
How old is he, ma'am?
He's 60. He just turned 70.
By all accounts, 30-year-old Thomas Gilbert Jr. lived a charmed life, backed by the wealth of his father, Wall Street millionaire and hedge fund founder Thomas Gilbert Sr. Growing up, the younger Gilbert appeared to follow in his father's footsteps by attending private schools, proving proficient in sports and graduating from the prestigious Princeton University. Tommy, as he was known to his friends, wanted to succeed without his family's assistance and tried to start his own business, but mostly floundered in his endeavors. He eventually resigned himself to partying, surfing, and dating socialites, while he remained financially dependent on his father. To the outside world, Tommy was a handsome and stylish heir, but his family and close circle were met with repeated instances of erratic behavior and violent outbursts. Since childhood, doctors had suspected that he was schizophrenic, but Tommy consistently rejected his family's attempts to help him. In 2014, he became a person of interest in the arson of a mansion in the Hamptons, New York City, but was never charged. The burnt property was owned by banking executive Peter Smith Sr., and Tommy had been a close friend of his son, Peter Smith Jr. After they'd fallen out, reportedly over a shared love interest, Tommy attacked Peter in 2013 and broke his nose. The latter didn't press charges but obtained a restraining order. By January of 2015, Gilbert Sr., who'd been covering 30-year-old Tommy's rent in New York City's upscale Chelsea neighborhood, had gradually reduced his allowance. On the morning of January the 4th, Tommy learned that he'd only be getting a few $100s per week. He subsequently showed up unannounced to his parents' Manhattan home and told his mother Shelley that he wanted to talk business with his father. He asked her to get him a soda and a sandwich from the store, and the woman obliged. She'd later remember feeling like something was off and turned back halfway down the block. Upon returning to the apartment, Shelley found 70-year-old Gilbert unresponsive on the floor with a Glock pistol in his hand and a gunshot wound to his head. Forensics would indicate that the weapon had been pressed against his temple with such force that it jammed when a second shot was attempted. Shelley called 911, and when asked who'd shot her husband, she told the dispatcher, "My son, who is nuts, but I didn't know he was this nuts."
I think he's just dead. He's been shot.
He's been shot?
Yes.
Okay, are you still willing to try to do,
I'm doing compressions now.
Can I ask her a question?
Yes.
Hello, ma'am. You said your husband was shot?
Yes.
How long ago?
Probably 10, 15 minutes ago. 10 minutes ago, maybe.
10 minutes ago he was shot?
Maybe 15.
By whom?
My son, who was nuts. But I didn't know he was this nuts.
Tommy was arrested at his Chelsea apartment following a manhunt lasting several hours. The illegal gun purchase was traced back to him, and his internet searches suggested he tried to find a hitman online. In the ensuing trial, prosecutors called the killing the ultimate temper tantrum. Tommy's legal team never disputed that he'd killed his father. They instead focused on the insanity defense, and Shelley attested that the family had struggled for years with Tommy's mental health, pleading for her son to get the lightest possible sentence. Tommy was ultimately found competent to stand trial. He was sentenced to at least 30 years in prison after being found guilty of 1 count of murder in the second degree and 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree. Thanks for watching. If you were entitled to 1 wish per year, granted without consequence, what would you wish for and why? Let us know in the comments section below.